Vampires. Those gothic beings that terrified an empire, inspired poetry and love stories, created an argument amongst philosophers and bohemians of the 18th century, and used as a disguise for social issues.
So, my friends, we fight not one beast, but legions that go on age after age after age, feeding on the blood of the living.
Vampires have forever significantly changed the horror fantasy genre by establishing more of creativity through cinematography, a freedom of a filmmaker to express, exercise, and draw ideas with any obstacles. From the silent era of Nosferatu towards the famous Bela Lugosi's Dracula, the vampire had a journey like no other supernatural creature, with meaningful stories, deep complexity of character, and a rich cinematography that aimed them to become popular to this day. Starting from a mere religious legend to a sophisticated historical persona filled with sexuality, grief, and powers beyond any human conceptions, those elements gave the filmmakers a creative platform to invoke the art of cinema through colors, special editing effects, symbolism, music, mise-en-scenes, and so much more. After many years of vampirism, one could think that this genre would soon be over, and yet it never dies.
Vampires. They're everywhere.
Bram Stoker, a name associated with one of the most famous horror characters of all time, was the scaffolder of future literature and filmmakers. Nosferatu, the German silent film of the 1922 adaptation by Monroe, complied early cinema techniques to create unique shots such as the famous forced perspectives, day to night, smoke and mirrors, which arguably is believed to perfectly conserve the thrill over the years. The vampire genre employs those techniques and adds extra illusion to portray a scene that seems out of place. Coppola's adaptation of Stoker's Dracula in 1993 revolutionized the genre by going back to trickeries without using any CGI. This can be easily depicted in his film and remain one of the most appreciated Dracula movies of all time. Without detailing some questioning acting,
bloody wolves chasing me through some blue inferno.
Coppola's love story between Dracula and Mina crosses an ocean of times and connects the literature to the cinema with the use of rich double exposure, superimposition shots, and specific transitions, paying homage to the early cinematography. Another famous vampire film that uses immortality as a metaphor for damnation is Interview with the Vampire, adapted from the novel with the same name by Anne Rice. In comparison to Dracula, this undoubtedly drives away from the idea of love conquers all theme and adopts rather a darker tone of suffering, inspired by Rice's loss of a child.
Do you still want death? Or have you tasted it enough?
Enough.
The vampire Louis speaks with the writer, telling a sad, tragic story of his immortal life and tries to deliver a message, establishing a link between the plot and the audience through the human interviewer. The usage of dark lenses and opposing mute tones creates a paradox, using spacious scenes to depict the loneliness of the three main characters, as well as evoking a feeling of claustrophobia. The movie employs wide shots, close-ups, and a non-linear story, playing back and forth from the New Orleans of the 18th century to the 90s in San Francisco. Both movies explore the idea of immortality as a curse, the power they possess, as well as the ability to seduce, murder, and hunt humans for blood. Parallel to the period in which the stories unfold, they both are distinctively different with similar lore. The power of color grades, edits, and symbolism creates an invisible line between one vampire's obsession of love and the other's grief.
I had a mother once, and Louis, he had a wife. He was mortal, the same as she, and so was I.
Both under the idea of living hell, of immortality. Colors in both films serve as a bond between the characters and the symbolism that the plot unravels. Coppola's obsession with red goes beyond the general definition of color of the blood. It reveals passion, lust, and sin that are highly complemented by the saturated blues. The wide geometrical shot depicts the cold tone of blue through the night and storm, representing the morality of the Victorian period, whilst Lucy's dreamlike movements illustrate the taboo of sexual desire through her red nightgown, feeling as if she mocks the period's moral rules for a proper young woman by playing with a red gown over a statue that can symbolize the austerity of aristocratic England. Interview with the Vampire adopts a more earthy mute color tones with yellow, interpreting the human condition, decay and madness. In the night scene when Louis waits for Lestat to make him immortal, he blends with the background by wearing the same green, almost equating Mina through the meaning of rebirth. It can also mirror his emotion of despair.
I couldn't bear the pain of their loss. I longed to be released from it.
Lestat, on the other hand, has an electric blue tone, which complements his persona. In the close-up of a wary Louis waiting his fate, Lestat appears as unclear yet evoking dominance over Lucien. This scene is similar to Coppola's film, where Lucy is drawn into the cemetery and attacked by Dracula. Much like Dracula, Lestat bites his human with the plan to create a new vampire. The difference is that Lucy evokes sensuality, while Louis embodies desperation and sadness.
Vampires do exist. This one we fight, this one we face. Has the strength of 20 or more people.
One of the most distinctively aspects of a vampire are its supernatural abilities of heightened senses, speed, super strength, and different characteristics that differentiate one creature from another. The filmmakers adopted cinema-complex or simple techniques to depict those powers in relation to a scene. Using reverse speed, Coppola's idea of unnatural behavior can be depicted in the vampire movements. Lucy, in particular, illustrates the soft supernatural motions by climbing down the stairs, going back to her grave, and being controlled by Dracula. By rejecting computer-generated imagery, Coppola found another way to create the old-look Victorian scene, by going back to a Patek camera that was used in the silent era, filming the classical shot where Vlad walks on the streets. Vampires are portrayed throughout the history as vicious, ugly beasts, the terrifying undead, but Interview with the Vampire shows us their sensuous beauty with glamming eyes and porcelain skin, statuesque appearances. In contrast, both films expose the bestial quality of the vampire during scenes where humans are transformed into undead. However, they diverge once again in the way they portrayed immortality through the contrasting perspective of love and grief.
Everybody's dying. Pay no attention. Happens to us all.
Bram Stoker's Dracula abounds in the symbolisms and semiotics theme. From the intro, the audience gets a feel of the enigmatic story. From the crush of the cross against the stone red lighted scene to a peacock feather transitioning into a tunnel, Coppola's adaptation of the movie is relying on more symbolism than Interview with the Vampire, for instance, to underline the fantastic nature of the story, as well as to create a journey of love between two different characters. Dracula is a unique character in Coppola's concept, hence he became a vampire through a religious curse, by stabbing a cross that signifies the divine, and a ritual beginning in his transformation. Most of the film goes back to the religious spiritual aspect. Dracula can be easily compared to Antichrist.
Do not put your faith in such trinkets of deceit.
Renegating God, serving blood and body, and fearing crucifixes, mirrors, and garlic. Mirrors, in particular, are made of silver that dates back to the Bible when Judas betrayed Christ with 30 pieces of silver and committed suicide after realizing his mistakes. In other stories, God, being angry at his action, resurrected him to haunt this world forever. In the Roman Empire, the peacock was the symbol of death and resurrection. This interpretation was perfectly illustrated by Coppola's transition from a peacock's eye to the tunnel. The red sky and deserted Carpathian mountains have hellish aesthetics, while Hacker travels by train, while the eyes of the Count appear on the sky. The cinematography of the symbolism, in this case, is portrayed by many transitions, double exposures, illustrating what a character feels and thinks, and the swinging camera that mimics the chaos, a swing of a ship when Dracula's powers reach London, and the speed that he uses to move around. Shadow and light. Those two are opposing forces in many symbols of a film. However, in Dracula's case, they almost serve the same purpose, to warn of a dangerous and to serve Dracula as a power. The light used in Dracula's film over the years shows the malicious facial characteristics and highlights their expression. When Dracula can enter a human house without being invited, he uses his shadow to control Lucy. Symbolisms play a key role in the vampire genre that brings a story to a new level of depth of human's condition.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a tax-paying American and small business owner in the great state of Louisiana. I also happen to be a vampire.
Throughout the years, vampires have been portrayed more or less based on similar laws. TV series took a step further in bringing a different side of the creature, social and supernatural. But one can argue that most of the vampire productions remote themselves from horror and approach a more human ideology. Sympathy and love goes beyond the gore and grotesque that the previous production was trying to portray. Maybe in the end, the living hell of immortality can be defined as awareness of a vampire to live forever and finding a purpose, such as love, hate, manipulation, or damnation.
I am dead to all the world. Hear me.
Or maybe the living hell is a human perception of eternal life, the fear that we all illustrate towards death and decay, the fear of missing out and being limited by our own nature, thus underlying our desire for immortality, then decaying and ultimately dying. And that's what the filmmakers beautifully portrayed in their stories.
Empty. Empty. That's it? No, it can't end like that.